Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Volatility Box Report for November 4th, 2019. We are TOSindicators.com, home of the Volatility Box. With today in our futures markets, we didn't really have any entries that set up, so we'll spend some time talking about how to use the Stock Volatility Box tool and really why it's useful on days like today, especially when we have no setups in the futures markets. We can start to scan the entire stock universe and find a few symbols with trades that we're used to with high probabilities using the same sort of models. And so that's our fade edge trades. And then we'll also talk about how you can use the stock volatility box just as information. So if you had any other means, if you're playing a trend, if you have any other tactic that already has you inside of a particular ticker, then you can use the volatility box to start to figure out where price may exhaust and where you may want to start to look at taking some targets. Also, for those of you out there who are familiar with him, I'll be going to a talk later on today where Ed Thorpe will be speaking. And for those of you that know him, he's considered to be the godfather of card counting and also one of the people at the forefront of quantitative trading. I talked about in the book, The Quants, if any of you have read it, but I'll be sure to share any insights. But for any quant nerds out there, I hope you're jealous because this is a talk that I'm really excited to go to. Anyway, so let's bring these tickers. So we'll look at Planet Fitness, Cisco, Procter & Gamble, and Roku using our new Volatility Box tool. And we'll walk you through the entire process. So if we come to the URL, volatilitybox.com, and you can go ahead and use the credentials that we provided you to log in. For those of you that don't currently have credentials, we're working on releasing this for the public, but so far it's for the Volatility Box Futures members only, but we'll be making it available for the rest of you as well pretty soon. Anyway, so once you log in, you'll now be coming on over to our indicator generator page, and we can go ahead and plug in those symbols. So we said Roku, Procter & Gamble, Planet Fitness, and Cisco, and we'll click Generate Indicator. And for the members, you can go ahead and explore some of these tabs. There's some interesting things in here, some of our scan links that we've talked about, and then we can go ahead and click each of these buttons to download the respective studies. So we'll download the aggressive first, and then the conservative. And each of these files we can directly import into Thinkorswim. So now if we bring it back to our platform and we'll come in here, we'll click import and we can go ahead and import both of these in. And we'll go ahead and load in our conservative volatility box first to take a look at Cisco and Procter & Gamble. And so if we pull up our conservative volatility box and click apply, now we can start to see how these models give us price areas where we can start to trade against. And in the case of Cisco, the reason we're using our conservative model is because the stock had just reported earnings. And so one of our rules that we've noticed is that for earnings, we're using our conservative volatility box to really just capture the wider range of volatility. And that really helped us, right? And so Cisco started with an open, price went down, and we had our upper levels here plotted as soon as price had made this low. And this lower level at this point is still quite a bit below, so that's not the value trade that we're looking at. But as soon as price starts to slam up, we now have an opportunity to go short, and this is almost a picture perfect short, right? Gives you the best price of the day to short, and this was our entry. Stop once again outside of the volatility box, and the target is this gray dashed line, and that helps you now formulate a very simple trade. And once you've taken off your first target here, you can now decide how you'd like to play the remainder of your position, whether you'd like to trail it with break even, whether you'd like to take off all your position here. And it also depends on if you're using stock or option. Now, I've talked about this for our volatility box members, but really the idea of using stock is very appealing, especially on a brokerage platform like Fidelity, or maybe sometimes TD Ameritrade if you're trading something on the exchanges where you now have $0 commission versus options where you still have that 65-cent fee that TD Ameritrade still charges. Fidelity does not charge that, but it's TD Ameritrade that charges that. But anyway, so this was that first opportunity to short. And then another symbol that we'll look at on our conservative volatility box is Procter & Gamble. And the reason why we're looking at Procter & Gamble on our conservative volatility box is because of when that alert actually came. And so by the time we had our alert where it crossed our 2 ATR signal, we had already surpassed the aggressive volatility box. And so using the conservative sort of made the most sense. And the alert came right around here. And this is where our squeeze using the dynamic RSI also started to plot. And then we can take a look that the squeeze actually fired downwards, and Procter & Gamble ended up making the exact move that we thought it may make using our conservative models on a day like today, right? And so if you did have, for some reason, another strategy that gets you in, and something interesting is if you came to the daily chart of Procter & Gamble, the reason why we talk about this is because this was a breakout for quite a few traders as soon as Procter & Gamble broke through that price. the conservative volatility box and the aggressive volatility box really start to give you areas of exhaustion where you can now look at targets, right? And right after we crossed our first level, it started to exhaust. And then once we headed into the clouds, this is where price sort of stopped for the day and then reversed, signifying that for the entire day we made the move that the conservative volatility box had predicted. And these clouds, this bottom cloud was plotted starting right here, the very first candle, considering that that was the high. And that's some really powerful information that you can start to use with any of your existing setups, especially when you don't have any future setups, at least for those of us that are primarily futures traders. Okay, now let's load in our aggressive volatility box. And now we'll take a look at Planet Fitness. And here we can see something similar, right? So we have these levels plotted once again when we had the open, considering the open was our high, and we're looking for an opportunity to go long. And that long comes right perfectly at our entry line, which ends up being the dead perfect reversal point for the day. Our stop is outside of the volatility box clouds. First target is that dashed line. And then you can start to see how Planet Fitness starts to make this move up. And using the volatility box and what we consider to be our normal entry, which is the beginning of these clouds right here on the stock volatility box, that ended up being your perfect entry, getting you a really nice move. And on something like Planet Fitness, where you can use options, you're not only able to use leverage, but you're buying options when they're cheap, right? A call option with price action falling into the clouds is a lot cheaper. And this lets you then not only buy cheap, but start to catch these reversal moves if you are an options player. Again, I still think that there's some benefit to be said about trading the actual stock, but I understand that it does require a lot more capital. And then the next symbol that we'll take a look at is ROKU. And ROKU, once again, we start to see that the aggressive volatility box gives us areas where we're starting to look for price to exhaust, right? And once we cross our target line, which is now you're entering our first levels, our most aggressive areas, if you will, price then starts to reverse from exactly this point, and then from that point on for the rest of the day starts to trail up. And for us, we're really looking for an entry right here at the clouds. And ROKU is one example where we not only had price cross our areas where you could have then started to look for an entry, but we also had our dynamic RSI indicator telling us that we were in super oversold territory, starting to give us a little bit more confidence in this trade. And if you had given me the super oversold with an entry right here at the clouds, that to me would have been an amazing entry for the day, which would have been an awesome reversal. We didn't fall as far as I wanted, but we do have a lot of you that like to front run your orders, and you don't mind getting a little bit more aggressive. And so for those of you, this might be a very viable trade. For us, we're looking right here at the volatility box clouds. So hopefully this starts to give you an idea of how you can start to use our stock volatility box tool to find entries on days like today where our futures markets aren't really offering us that much action in terms of edges, but now we can start to actually still find other opportunities, and you can start to scale these positions. So say, for example, if you are usually used to trading one micro futures lot, you can start to take that same amount of risk by trading just one share, which you can suddenly start to do now that commission's actually free. If you start to think of shares as units that you can start to scale into, then that becomes really powerful as well in conjunction with this volatility box tool. All right, hopefully this video helps you. Once again, the steps are: we run the scans for the stock volatility box. You then come in, input those symbols, click generate, download these files, which you can then directly import into Thinkorswim. And over the next few days, we'll talk about how we actually do this in the morning, how we use the scans, and how you can sort of intelligently keep updating the indicator file as time goes on. But you'll also start to notice over the course of this month that there will be some really, really nice updates in this tool, including the ability to not even have to worry about generating indicator files, but really outsourcing it to our entire machine in the back end, where you can then just have an alert as soon as an entry gets triggered, sent to your phone directly. And before we forget, let's take a look to see what we have on the calendar tomorrow. So first we have a trade balance coming out at 5:30 a.m. Pacific. And then later on, so this is 30 minutes after the market opens, we also have ISM numbers coming out. And really, this is the point at which we're usually using our aggressive volatility box line test, that first hour test, to determine which volatility box to use. And so this may be a point where you'd like to just be a little bit more cautious and start off by maybe being on the conservative volatility box and letting volatility then give you the permission to get back to the aggressive volatility box. Again, completely up to you and your trading style, but this is the event that calls for us to be a little bit more cautious, and it does have that red folder icon, and it's really the output of this number that then would dictate which volatility box you should be on and what kind of volatility we may expect outside of it, depending on what happens in terms of what the expectation expectations. Hopefully this video helped you. We look forward to trading tomorrow. Hopefully we have some more entries using our futures volatility box, and we'll see you in tomorrow's nightly update. Take care, everyone.